it is time to catch up with Gary DeLacy, Superintendent of Schools for Clinton. We got a lot of legislative stuff to talk about, Gary.
Well, it's coming right around the corner. As soon as we get through the first of the year, there's a Clinton County legislative kickoff on January 4th, which will actually be in the Clinton Community School District boardroom at 8 in the morning, and that'll have our local legislators there to preview the session. And then that following week, that Monday, which I believe is January 8th, is the first day of the legislative session, and the governor's speech is then January 9th, where she'll lay out her priorities. So, we'll get through the holidays, and boom, it's going to be here.
You started out, of course, as a teacher and a coach, went to administration, now as a superintendent. Did you ever think that you would be so interested in what's going on in Des Moines?
Well, obviously, as a teacher and coach, I wasn't. I mean, and it probably needed to be more in the know at that time. But really, part of your job as an administrator is to follow those things and what's going on, because it's going to definitely have impact on your students. And part of your job as a superintendent is to advocate for your students and what's best. And a lot of those things are out of your control. Legislators control, your supplemental state aid and some of the other legislation that's coming down. And so it is important. You have to be, in my mind, that's part of your job as a superintendent, is be aware of the issues, advocate on what I feel is best for students, and not just in Clinton, but in the state of Iowa. And, it's always that balance of priorities between you can't have everything. So that, what is best for students within the financial parameters that you have.
We were talking before we went on air. I asked if you do get an opportunity to go to Des Moines, and you say yes a couple of times.
Yeah. Grow Clinton, there'll be a kind of a Clinton County day where we'll go out. I try to go to that one. The AEA 9 superintendents, we're scheduled to be out there on January 17th. We've set our date already. So pretty much a week after the governor's speech to get out there, because I'm sure she'll lay out we're hearing some things already because they're caucusing. They caucused last Thursday, the Republican Party, Senate, and that. And so we're just hearing things leaking out of what potentially could be coming up this session. And so I think the sooner we can get out there and advocate for kids, the better.
Of course, Wes Golden is going to follow you. Are you getting Wes involved in this?
Yeah, Wes will be the AEA 9 superintendent's legislative. He'll come with me. So part of the plan of me announcing my retirement as early as I did and getting a successor established, and with it being Wes, was to really work hard on transition, so that on July 1st, Wes is really kind of stepping in and we're not losing a step or a beat in the process, and we're still doing what's best for the district.
Again, visiting with Gary DeLacy. Well, let's get into it. SSA.
So that's supplemental state aid, which basically you can think as your...
Got an incoming call from a legislator.
Yeah,
right now.
That's it. SSA is basically, I would call this your cost of living increase. And it's based per student. Over the last 14 years, it's only averaged 2%. It has not kept up with the cost of living. Last year, we did get 3%, and really the Republican House pushed that. The governor and the Senate were lower. Senate was at 2, and the governor was at 2.5. They did come in at 3. That was better. I'll be honest. Inflation at that point last year was running between 5 and 6%. So even though that was the second highest in 14 years, it was still about half of the rate of inflation. Now, inflation's come down now that it's more around 3.1. So a 3% would be kind of a keeping up with it. Obviously, we're kind of in a catch-up mode, but we definitely need a minimum of 3%. If not, we're going to continue to fall behind.
Per pupil inequity.
So the per pupil inequity was actually way back before the early 1970s. School funding was 100% property tax. So property-rich districts could actually levy less because they're property rich, but they were generating more money than property poor districts. So what the state did when they went to a state foundation formula is they set a level and they grandfathered in these property rich districts higher than everyone else. So since 1972, there's been an inequity. It used to be as wide as $175, and I can invoke Art Tate from Davenport. He was kind of championing this 7-8 years ago because Davenport was the $175 less than a Pleasant Valley,
Right.
and it was based off 1972 and nothing corrected. For our district, it's still $129. For Comanche and DeWitt, it's $140. They've reduced it to $140, so that is the maximum inequity. Now, you'll say, well, that's not that much. For our district, that's about $500,000, or 6 or 7 teachers. And remember, this has been going since 1972. And think about, why do we have the inequity? Property rich versus property poor. So it would cost $68 million for the state to get rid of it completely. They spent $300 million last year on educational savings accounts, and they do have $1.8 billion in savings coffers right now.
Yeah.
So it isn't an argument we don't have the money. Right. They do have the money. It comes down to a priority. Is equity important? And I'll be honest, in Clinton County, I mean, those are your biggest school districts. Clinton, DeWitt, Comanche, we're all heavily impacted by this.
I would think so. Yeah, one more item before we take a break for the weather. Funding stream for SROs and campus security.
So right now, the funding for school resource officers, and we have some campus security at Clinton High School, comes out of the general fund, which is the same thing that funds teachers. And so it becomes a value judgment. You know, when budgets get tight, do you continue to fund the SRO? If you can, and I'll be honest, I'd like to increase our school resource officers in our district from 3 to 5. Because 3 right now, I mean, they're kind of housed at one at the high school, one at the middle school, and one at the alternative high school, with minimal visibility at our elementaries. And then what I'd really like to see with 5 is a lot more visibility at the elementaries, and when needed, when we have bigger events, homecoming week, lots going on at the high school, I really feel like having a second school resource officer would be very beneficial. I would like to see a separate funding stream so it's not a decision between, I'm going to be honest, class size, because when you're saying teachers, do I have to increase class size in order to have a school resource officer? Because that's the value judgment. If it became a separate funding stream under safety, now you're not competing against teachers. And to me, that's where it's about an operational expense. School safety is operational. It shouldn't compete against teachers.
And it seems like campus security is very, very good here in Clinton.
We with us having 3, and then I'll be honest, we now have the evolved weapon detection system at the high school. That has been well received. Even our neighbors, we've used it during our football games. I just had a meeting with Teresa Schultz yesterday, and we were kind of reviewing the year so far. The number one thing that came out of her mouth was just the calmness she senses in the building, that kids feel like there's that additional layer of safety that you don't have to, in the back of your mind, you know, did somebody bring a weapon to school? That we are really screening that hard to keep our school environment at Clinton High School as safe as possible. I would still advocate Clinton High School right now is the safest campus in the state of Iowa.
All right, very good. Again, visiting with Gary DeLacy. Let's take a break for the weather, brought to you by Electronics.
Happy Thursday. We are going to see a cloudy day today. Most of us should see dry skies through majority of your Thursday. Highs will be in the mid-40s. And we are going to see a chance for a few sprinkles develop later on this evening, but widespread rain is going to hold off until later on tonight. Overnight lows are going to stay fairly mild for us in the upper 30s and low 40s. We'll see that widespread rain develop into Friday and stick with us through the afternoon. I'm Storm Track 8 meteorologist Morgan Strackbine.
Well, we're at 37 degrees now, still overcast, east winds at 10. Our update brought to you by Electronics.
Electronics Incorporated in Clinton is the area's largest communication and alarm systems company. Electronics offers best-in-class life safety, security, two-way radios, and communications equipment from top brands. Electronics, the company you've trusted for over 50 years, can now provide fire extinguisher sales, service, and inspections, plus kitchen hood inspections as well. Call or visit them online at www.electronicsinc.com for your free estimate.
Visiting with Gary DeLacy on our FYI. We are talking legislative AEA discussion.
Lots of discussion, and I would say smoke, coming out right now. And the governor's actually came out now saying that she wants to re-look at AEAs and their services. That is hugely concerning to me and superintendents. The AEAs are our major support in special education. Your school psychologists, your social workers, all these things that kind of provide equity across the state. So even if you're an Easton Valley, a small district, you've got access to these resources of the AEA. I am really concerned if there's a consolidation or an elimination, which would even be worse, and they're going to just say, what we're hearing is they're going to take that money to improve teacher salaries. Well, to me, that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. I do think we have to improve teacher salaries, but to eliminate the AEAs to do that, and then we have a huge gap in these services, and then we're going to be kind of told, well, you need to figure it out. I think that's going to really set us in the wrong direction. So I do think this is going to be a major thing at the beginning of the session. I do expect the governor to talk about this in her speech on January 9th, and I think this is going to be one of the hottest topics at the beginning of the session.
Gary, how did AEAs come about?
Well, AEAs came about as kind of an offshoot of the Department of Education in a way to streamline and support local school districts, because we can't, I'm going to be honest, with the shortages right now, but even back then, how can you find school psychologists? And we would be competing against each other, like Comanche and us. We would be competing for a school psychologist. And the AEAs were developed to provide some equity across the state and provide these special ed services so that every student eligible for those services across the state would have access. So that was the premise. Now, one of the arguments the governor's making is, well, they've expanded now to professional development of teachers and things like that. Well, it's an efficiency thing, too. I would say that we're doing a leadership series with our building principals right now. I cannot afford to be bringing in the trainers that the AEA is bringing in. But when the AEA does it, and they bring in Clinton, Bettendorf, Pleasant Valley, Davenport, Comanche, DeWitt, and you bring all these together, and now the AEA obviously evens out that cost between all of us, it becomes affordable. And to me, AEAs are about efficiency. And again, I'm just a little bit worried that, okay, we need to improve teacher salaries, because they have not raised the minimum teacher salary in the state. I don't know, it's been 12, 15 years. It's still $33,500. That is obviously way too low when you have teachers that have $100,000 in student loan debt coming out nowadays. So I told, and we're above that 33.5 in Clinton, and a lot of our neighbors are, because you had to try to keep up, but still probably where we're in the low 40s, probably needs to be 50 to really, when you're trying to attract against the private sector. And you're talking about people that have to have bachelor's degrees. Some of them need master's degrees. And the student loan debt thing, Gary, is what's the game changer. When I got through in the mid-'80s with Pell Grants and that, I had minimal debt. Minimal. I see some of these candidates coming in now with, $100,000 is not out of the question. That to me is like a mortgage.
That's amazing.
So that's a mortgage. But yet we're going to offer you $40,000. And the thing, they got to live. And how do you? And we got things like the peanut butter program, but still, when it's that big of amount of money, either that or the state needs to do something with student loan debt for teachers, because they're drowning in it.
You know, something that I thought about while you were visiting or talking about that is the legislators out there. In our area, of course, Art Oley, a teacher, was out there. Polly Butka, a teacher, was out there. What is the percentage? Any idea what teachers are in the legislature?
Not many. I would tell you that demographic has went down, and that perspective has went down.
Okay. Open enrollment deadline.
This will be this will be a big area that I will push. About a year and it was the end of the 22 session, and at midnight they passed a bill that got rid of the open enrollment deadline, which used to be March 1st. So now a student basically can open and roll out anytime. And from a budgeting, staffing perspective, that's chaos. Because you don't know how many students you're educating. Your funding is based on the number of students, and now they're floating everywhere. And so you got the financial budgeting impact, but you also have the impact of, unfortunately, we have a smaller group of parents that are now using this, in my mind, as a get-out-of-jail-free card with truancy. If they're not sending their kids to school and we go through a truancy process, I'll just open and roll my kid out before I get to that final thing. We've been very tough on bringing kids back to school from online. 3 years ago with the pandemic, we had at one point 475 kids online. A lot of those were not successful, and we've been very tough in terms of, if you're not making academic progress, you need to come back to in-person learning. Now they'll open and roll to Cam or Clayton Ridge. And then what actually ends up happening is 4 or 6 months down the road, and they still haven't done nothing with online, then they come back to us. And, okay, now we've got a potential dropout. Those kinds of things that are going on. The deadline has not been good for a lot of those areas. And then I'll be honest, I heard the story at Cal Wheat with the girls cross-country runner that tried to open and roll to Tipton 2 weeks before districts so she could run with the Tipton team. And, it's almost getting into that portal of college at the high school level. And to me, that's not appropriate. And it definitely, we're not even talking education right now.
Oh, no, it's
because my bottom line is
athletics.
It's all about, that's athletics, or we're trying to get out of truancy, or we're trying to get out of this. And to me, those are not the reasons for that. And to me, getting a deadline, there's so many good reasons why we have a deadline. And we always had exceptions to the deadline. Mm-hmm. Go back to the exceptions and say, if they moved, they could open and roll back. If there was a documented bullying situation, that was an exception to the deadline. That will be another major thing that will be discussed this session.
Seem pretty passionate about that, Gary.
Well, it's not what's good for kids.
Yeah. CHS construction update. We got to get that.
Well, if this weather forecast you keep announcing continues to be in the 40s and 50s, that's very good for us, because we're not closed in on phase 2 yet, but they tell me every day that it's above freezing, we can be laying block. And we've had the majority of days in December, we've been above freezing. Yeah. And so I don't know if that'll extend into January or February. That would be really helpful to really keep the project tracking in the right direction. But I would encourage you to drive up on, I think it'd be 11th Avenue South, up above, where you get up above Clinton High School on the bluff and look down. That is probably the best view right now. You can really kind of see where the new Performing Arts Theater, and when you're taking that view, to the left is the music wing, and to the right will be the new CTE wing. And that'll be finished probably in later 2024, but obviously, if we get good weather, that really ensures that we're going to get that phase 2 finished up in 2024.
Is there any way people can go, like, maybe online or find out more information on how the update is going?
We do have things. I know Paul Dotterich runs a Facebook page through Plant Services and does that. My marketing director, Aubrey Kelly, does updates on our website. I try to get in there every 2 or 3 weeks and get into the construction site and shoot some pictures that people wouldn't be able to get into those angles and look at what's going on. So we the project's still on time and on budget. So that's the good things, but people also, it's a long project, so people are like, especially that Performing Arts Center, I think that's the next thing. Obviously, the renovation of Yord, people are already enjoying that. And then phase one really is about 70% of our programming. So our kids are seeing the majority of the new Clinton High School, but I'm sure our music kids would be excited to get into their new environment, to get into that new performance center. In our CTE area, that's the 1956 building, original. It's one of the few buildings that is still not air conditioned. Obviously, we're not going to air condition it at this point because it'll get demoed as soon as this new one opens.
Yeah.
It'll be good. It'll be good as this project gets closer to conclusion.
Well, I tell you what, the Hank Dillman press box is a lot milder now than what it used to be at wintertime. Duke Slater statue project update.
And we had some things back on Saturday, December 9th. We laid the bricks down on that, so that is going to be an opportunity for people now. If you go take a look at it, it's a very nice stamped brick area. It's right across from the CHS pool area on the corner of 8th Avenue South and was it South 9th Street? I'm thinking so. That'd be the intersection. I'd encourage people to take a look at that. We still are looking at pouring the pedestal if the weather stays this warm out. Once we get the pedestal in, the statue is currently under construction, and we will get that this upcoming summer. And then this spring is our plan to landscape around it and get that ready to roll. And then at the beginning of the football season next year, we would actually have a dedication ceremony for that Duke Slater statue. And that'll be an exciting addition to our campus. And, you know, the story of Duke Slater is just amazing in terms of how he broke barriers. Not just on the football field, but what he did in the judicial system in the city of Chicago. I can't think of a better role model for our current student body than Duke Slater.
How big of a statue are we talking here?
Life size. So Duke was like of 6'1", which at that time was pretty good size.
Yes.
So it is a life-size statue. And then the committee wanted it on a pedestal, so you're going to be looking up at him.
As well we should.
Yeah.
Ken Williams staff in service January 2nd.
So just something for the community to know. January 2nd is an in-service day. Kids will come back on January 3rd. Ken Williams is a national speaker and will have a really good message about equity among students. I talked about per pupil equity earlier. He'll talk about it from a different angle, but a very inspirational speaker that will challenge a lot of our teachers' thinking. Yeah, I know I listened to him in September. He really challenged my thinking. I'm going to be very excited to have him here on January 2nd.
Very good. Hey, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll talk to you in the new year.
Sounds great.
Listen Christmas Eve at 7 p.m. for a special broadcast of George Frederick Handel's classic oratoria, The Messiah.